Hello, I'm Tara and you're watching Knit Desserts. Thanks for joining me again or checking out my channel for the first time. Today I'm going to share some progress on my knitting that I've made in the past month or so. I've actually tried to record this episode a couple of times, but for various reasons it didn't work out. So I was originally going to include some spinning, but as I've worked on things more and more, it just didn't make sense to fit that all in one episode, so I'm going to save that for the future, and I'll just talk about a bunch of knitting works in progress and a couple of finished objects today. First, let's start with a dessert. Today is just a simple vanilla ice cream with M&Ms on top. I love me a good frozen M&M, and I won these M&Ms from a baby shower from guessing the closest to the correct number in the jar. And this recent baby shower is a little bit tied in because I did knit an item for the new baby. So I will show that off even though I don't have the item with me. I have several pictures and some video of it. So let's get started. The first finished object I'll mention is this one that I'm wearing, which is the Vertices Unite shawl. This is a pattern by Stephen West. It's super popular. It's got over 7,000 Ravelry projects, so I'm sure you've heard of it. But I had never knit a Stephen West pattern, and I was just feeling in the mood to cast on something fun and play with some stash. So what I've used is Knit Picks palette in 5 colors, and I made the small size. So it's a nice kind of shallow triangular shape. It's just perfect for wrapping around and tying once. And it used less than 50 grams of each color. Now a nice thing in the pattern, I don't know if this is a recent update, but it has a schematic with each section detailed, like colors A and B and C, D and E. So I copied the schematic into Microsoft Paint, and then I took the photos from my Ravelry of the yarn colors and kind of used the eyedropper tool in Paint to get those colors, and I filled in the schematic with different color combinations to decide what I would want to cast on. And I'm pretty happy with it. I really enjoyed knitting this project. I think the one thing I'm not sure about is this big blotch of gray. It's kind of boring compared to the rest, but my winter jacket is gray, so it really goes with it well. So I cast this on the way to my ski trip to Crested Butte, and it was a really nice travel project. So it's knit modularly. You start in this corner and you do this stripe section, and then you pick up along this edge and knit some more stripes in this direction. You maybe can't tell that those are stripes because they're kind of charcoal and navy, but I like the subtlety there. Then you kind of pick up along this edge, and then you're knitting together with this at the end of those rows, and you just keep on going and the numbers all work out magically. And I really like the modular joining effect. So you have a slip stitch edge, and it makes picking up the stitches really easy. You don't have to count any ratios, you just pick up every slip stitch, and then it makes a nice border on the wrong side of the fabric. And then at the very end you do the I-cord bind off all the way around. So I found the pattern was super easy to follow and really fun to knit, and I really like how wearable it is and how easy it would be to make with so many color combinations. Now I think in the pattern he recommended like a 40-inch circular needle, and for the I-cord edge you need that, but as I was traveling, I had brought minimal needles, so I had just like a really long cable, and I was starting with like my little cast on of like 2 or 3 stitches, and just, I don't know, handling that really long cable on the plane with such few stitches was a little bit of a pain. But as it grew a little, it got easier, and then when I got home I put on a more normal sized cable. So yeah, I'll list the colors I used below, but they're just kind of random cool tone grayish colors that I had in my stash, and there's like a lavender, charcoal, and navy, icy gray, and a medium gray. So I can see myself knitting many of these in the future. Next in the finished objects list is a new headband. Oh, got some lint. A new headband. So this one is called Shutter. It's by Olgajazzy, also known as Olgajazzy on Ravelry. And she has a lot of really cool geometric patterns with techniques that I've never seen elsewhere. So this one was cool because I could not fathom how you would make this. And turns out it's very simple. It's all knit and stockinette, and then there's some joining on the wrong side. So it's knit straight and then knit together on the bias, and then that creates this kind of waviness, and then when you block it, you shape it to have these petals. So it's really quick and easy to make, and the most tedious part was in the blocking, and because it's so dense it took several days to dry, and I had to rotate it a lot. But since then I've been wearing it a lot. So I had made kind of one of these wider headbands in the fall, or maybe last year, but it was more fall colored. So I wanted a new one that was more spring appropriate. So the yarn I used was Purl Soho Wigeon. It's a sport weight Falkland merino wool, and it's very, very soft. It hasn't pilled at all. And yeah, I just had 100 grams of it because I bought it on a sale and I wanted to try it out. It reminded me a lot of knitting with the Knit Picks High Desert yarn that I used for my Levan cardigan. It's like a plump 3-ply sport weight, would be really good for cables and good stitch definition. So the pattern comes in, I think, 5 sizes, like head circumferences, and then 2 widths, a narrow and a wide. But it's really easy to modify, and you can do in between sizes. So what I did, I had planned to make the wide size, but once I got like pretty close to the halfway point, I was a little worried that depending how wide I make it, I would run out of yarn. So I didn't want to play yarn chicken, so I made a size kind of between the narrow and wide. And I made the size 2 circumference. And when you cast on, it seems like a little bit big compared to a typical hat or headband. So I didn't gauge swatch because I'm lazy like that, and I wasn't really trusting the process, so I knit super tight, super dense, and then when I did the joins on the wrong side, it did cinch in, and it was almost too tight, so I should have just trusted the process. And but after I blocked it, I steamed it and stretched a little bit just to make it a little bit less snug on my head. Now it's just about perfect. So I think it's pretty cute, and I would say it's easy to make, but if you're gonna be washing it a lot, it's maybe not the best pattern because you'd have to reshape these petals every time you wash it. So yeah, I think that was a really fun little way to use up a skein. And also, I submitted this to the hashtag Lonely Skeins project on Instagram. KnitWeekend, Haley, is running a knit along. I think it goes until September, so you've got plenty of time to use up all those random lonely skeins in your stash that maybe you have left over from a project or just looked pretty and you bought it because you wanted to try it. So this is my Lonely Skeins project. I ended up having maybe about 20 grams left over, and like I said, kind of reminded me of the Knit Picks High Desert yarn, about the same weight, same construction. So I thought it might be fun to use these as an embellishment in a new project. And that project is the basic plain gloves. So I've got two going at once. I'm just switching the double pointed needles and putting spare needles in when I'm having it on hold, so that I can knit every finger to the exact same stitch count and not forget what I did. So I used the red High Desert Sport yarn for the contrast sporty stripes. So my thought in my head was like, wouldn't it be fun to do red for right and purple for left? Not that purple goes with left, but just red goes with right. So that was just the weird inspiration I had for this project. So the main yarn, the gray, is also Knit Picks High Desert in Quail, and I just had one lonely skein of that. So these stripes did not use very much yarn at all, so I was hoping to use up more of these, but maybe I'll do a random finger in one color or the thumb. I don't know. These gloves are called Basic Plain Gloves by Harry Wells. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I learned about Harry Wells through the Madison Knitters Guild newsletter. He was a speaker there, might have been this month or last month. I'm a member, but I've never been to a meeting, but I do read the newsletters for inspiration. So the pattern is really simple, and it's actually the same construction for the right hand and left hand. It's like the increases for the thumb are the same, so you don't actually need like different colors to tell them apart. I just did that for fun. And then there are 4 circumferences, hand circumferences in the pattern, and then you can basically knit the length to fit your hand. So I found it pretty easy to follow, and I should be finished with these, but I've just been kind of having random cast on energy, so it's been going into other projects instead of finishing one project. So there's not that much to say about these, but yeah, they'll be just in time for summer, and maybe I'll put them in my jacket pocket when I finish, just for a nice surprise come fall when I actually need them. And they're using a lot less yarn than I expected, so this was a 100 gram skein. I feel like I have about half left, and I only have like 4 fingers and 2 thumbs to make, so I'm going to have a lot of extras of this. And I don't think that was mentioned in the pattern. There was no yarn quantity estimate. There's a gauge estimate and a needle size and everything, but there was not a yarn yardage or weight estimate, so I just picked something that I knew I would have enough of. I guess I'm going a little out of order. I talked about one whip already, but it seemed like a good transition since I was using the same yarn as a contrast color. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I recently attended a baby shower. This was for my boyfriend's nephew and his fiance in Iowa. They're having a baby in late May. They come from kind of a farming background, so I thought it would be fun to make a baby corn bunting. Sometimes I just look up random keywords on Ravelry and see what patterns are listed under that word and find some inspiration that way. And one time I was looking for corn, and I found this free pattern from Lion Brand called Baby Corn Bunting, and I didn't know what a bunting was, so I was telling people I'm making a baby corn suit. And man, this is one of the cutest things I've ever seen, and I cannot wait to see it on the baby. So I'll put a video so that you can see what it looks like. So the pattern is written with very minimal instruction. It gives you the stitch patterns and the needle size and quantities and all that, but it doesn't tell you exactly where to make increases or what type of increases to use. It just says like increase at each edge for X number of times until you have X number of stitches. So I had to do some thinking to figure that out. So everything is knit flat and seamed, and people wrote that they either wish they had made it seamless or modified it to make it seamless. And if I were to do it again, I would knit the green part all in one piece, and then I think like having a few seams is all right with me. I'm not really scared of seams, but it just takes a little extra time and effort to line everything up. So but my size 5 circular needles were on a different project, and I got out the old aluminum straight needles, and I cast on with this really slick cotton bamboo yarn. I used Lion Brand CoBoo because the yarn that the pattern was designed for is discontinued, so this was a very close substitute. And I used the colors yellow and olive. And I kind of wish the green was a little brighter, but it was the only green they had in that weight and good suitable material when I needed it. So, but I think it still looks close enough to a corn husk to be very cute. So yeah, I would not recommend knitting this yarn on metal straight needles. It was so stressful. Now, if you are a newer knitter and that's all you've tried, and especially if I have brought these type of needles and tried to teach you how to knit, I'm sorry about that, because I know that it's so much more difficult than it needs to be. So I'm a bamboo girly, so that's what I typically use, but I have a bunch of just random spares in case one of mine is occupied, so I thought it would be a good chance to use those, and now I see why I don't use those very much. So besides the like the increasing and the seams, I think it was pretty straightforward to knit, except for the hood. The hood, what I ended up doing was, instead of binding off at the shoulders and seaming, I left the live stitches and I did a 3 needle bind off, leaving the middle like 29 stitches of the back live, and then I just knit straight up in the husk pattern for about 6 inches, and then I would my plan was to have 4 inches straight up and then 2 inches that would kind of fold forward. And then I like to fill in the gap between that fold and the bottom. I knit some little wedges. And then all along the front I knit some ribbing in the yellow color. And that continued up from the corn section. And then on the corn part, the pattern has you overlap the 2 front sections and use snaps down the center, but I cast on 4 fewer stitches on each side panel so that they did not overlap, and then I installed a yellow zipper instead. So I hope the zipper is a little bit easier to maneuver a wiggly baby into, but my zipper wasn't as long as, it was just the yellow zipper that I had in my possession, and I didn't go buy a longer zipper, so I hope it is long enough, and I think it is. But yeah, I think the zipper was definitely the way to go. And it wasn't as scary as I thought to sew the zipper on. So I did also modify the edges of the corn pattern to have a slip stitch edge, so it was really easy to see where to sew. Yeah, so it came out pretty sturdy, and then my hood, because I just made it up and I kind of ran out of time at the last minute, it did not end up as voluminous as I would hope. So I think it'll still fit on the baby and look cute, but I added some elastic cords in the hood ribbing to give it a little more shape. But that would be something I would definitely change if I knit it again. Okay, back to another whip. These are a pair of slippers that I showed in my previous podcast episode talking about my knitting progress. I had just finished the soles at the time, and when I first recorded this episode, I didn't have any progress on the slippers, but as a few more weeks have gone by, I actually did pick them up again. I got past the scary thinking part, and I knit up the sides and the instep. So now they actually look a little bit like feet shaped, and yeah, I just have these extra big needles on to block the stitches from coming loose, but because I'm knitting on this one currently. So let's see, the pattern is by Bekah Knits. I talked about it a lot in the last episode, but I'll just go over briefly. The yarn I'm using is the Patons Classic Worsted Wool for the soles, and a farm yarn DK weight kind of oatmeal-y colored wool from the Madison Farmers Market, and I'm holding 2 strands together to get more of a worsted weight. So it's really dense up here, and then this pattern on the sole is like a double knit that looks like knitting, or it looks like stockinette on one side, and it looks like garter stitch on the other side. Yeah, so this whole pattern is seamless, and it uses a lot of short rows, and it's very intensive you have to really mind every stitch and make sure you don't miss any instructions, because it's not the most intuitive construction. But I think now that I'm at this point, it should be pretty straightforward, and I'll be able to finish it. Again, like the gloves, just in time for spring, summer weather. I probably don't need to wear these in the summer, but they'll be nice to have when the fall comes. So I'm always knitting in the wrong season. But that's not the point. So just an update, they look like shoes. Not too much else to say there. My last whip today is also one that I mentioned in my previous podcast episode. This is the Chevron baby blanket, a free pattern from Purl Soho, and it looks pretty much the same on both sides. It's just a simple repeat with increases and decreases that create this chevron pattern, and I thought the bind off was really cool. So you like work the right side with the decreases as normal, and then you bind off on the increase row. So you actually work 2 increases into your bind off, and that continues the chevron shape on the cast off edge. So that's something I had never done before, and it was very cool. So now this is no longer being a needle hog. But I do have one more thing to do. I have to widen the sides a bit. So I'm donating this blanket to Knots of Love, which requires a minimum size of 24 by 30 inches, and mine's only about 22 inches wide. And I made sure I knit it long enough, so I think it's 33 inches long. But I didn't want to show it until I had at least a plan for what to do next. And I think I have a plan, or at least an idea. So I found in a vintage book online, it's like an archive book from the early 1900s, maybe even the late 1800s. There was this garter stitch lace pattern, and the scalloped edge perfectly emulates the chevron edge of this, and it's knit in the direction that I could line up all of the garter rows with the rows of the blanket. So it's like a 20 row repeat, and it was all written out row by row. So I made a little chart in Excel to be able to follow it, and then that also made it easier to modify. So I think it's probably meant to be knit on very tiny needles with tiny yarn to be a really cute, delicate lace edging. But because I'm knitting it in a DK weight, it looks kind of bulky, and it has these like double yarn overs that just creates too big of a hole for a baby blanket. So on the next repeat, I tried to knit it without those, and I like it a lot better, but I'm still wondering if these holes are too big for a baby blanket that I'm going to donate, and I don't want it to get rejected because I've put so much time into this. So I think I'm going to test out some various textured stitches instead of the yarn overs. So we'll see what happens with that. And then I have to determine, like, if this is a 20 row repeat, do I have a multiple of 20 rows in my blanket, or do I have to start in the middle of a repeat to line up the edges of my blanket? So there's a little bit of math to do there and some more swatching, but at least I came up with an idea. Even if I knit this just in plain garter stitch, that might be good enough. So now that the blanket is cast off and it's not hogging a big cable from my interchangeable needle set, I'm not as worried about finishing it, and I don't have this giant slog of a project hanging over my head. So I'll just take my time to finish it nicely so that whoever receives it will really appreciate it. And oh yeah, the yarn is Cascade Ultra Pima. It's a DK weight, and it's like a nice shiny finish. It's really nice to work with, and I like this color a lot. So because it's cotton, it's the ends are not really gonna like felt into the final product. So what I did for weaving in the ends is I divided the 4 plies into 2 sets of 2 plies, and I wove those in separately so that it doesn't bulk up the weaving in. And then also, like if one starts to slip out, at least the other would hopefully stay secured. And I will trim these little ends when I wash it, because I don't want to trim them too short, just in case they kind of move around in the washing process. Alright, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for joining me and being patient that I haven't released an episode in a little while. I've been doing a lot of traveling and, like I mentioned, a little bit of spinning recently. So I hope to have another update soon, and I think it'll be a little easier to record now that there's more light available after work, so I don't have to wait for the perfect day to get everything in the universe aligned to make a video. So see you next time, and I hope you have a nice day wherever you are in the world.